The Justice Department has launched an investigation of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. The investigation centers on an alleged conspiracy by the two Democratic leaders to impede federal immigration agents to impede their work. It comes as protests have intensified after the fatal shooting last week of Renee Good by an ICE agent. Nearly 3,000 federal immigration agents have been dispatched to Minneapolis to arrest people who are in the United States illegally. Ian Lee is in Minneapolis. Ian, good morning.
Good morning, Adriana. CBS News has learned this investigation focuses on whether Walz or Frey have impeded federal immigration action through public statements they've made.
Armed, masked, undertrained ICE agents are going door to door, ordering people to point out where their neighbors of color live.
In a statewide address Wednesday night, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz criticized the federal immigration crackdown in Minneapolis.
And if you see these ICE agents in your neighborhood, take out that phone and hit record.
On Friday, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey called the operation an invasion.
What we're seeing on our streets is unnecessary abuses of force.
Now both Democrats are under federal investigation. Multiple sources familiar with the matter tell CBS News the probe stems from statements Walz and Frey have made about the immigration action. In response, both men took to social media, with Walz posting, "Weaponizing the justice system against your opponent is an authoritarian tactic," and Frey writing, "I will not be intimidated." Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche appeared to hint at the investigation earlier this week with a post saying, "Walz and Frey, I'm focused on stopping you from your terrorism by whatever means necessary. This is not a threat, it's a promise."
Back up! Back up!
Protests have increasingly turned violent since the killing of Renee Good by an ICE agent earlier this month. Law enforcement breaking up crowds with tear gas and pepper balls, putting some Minnesota residents on edge.
People are refusing to come out the house.
The chairman of Minnesota's Republican Party, Alex Plekish, is criticizing Walz and Frey's handling of the situation.
In the past, where the governor or the mayor have said that they support law enforcement in the performance of their duties, but they don't seem to be enforcing law enforcement when the feds come in and do it. I think it's ironic and hypocritical.
But he's also concerned about reports American citizens have been rounded up by ICE.
I feel for the people that feel fearful that are legitimate citizens. That's not right. If they have fears like that and they're legitimate, they're here legitimately, they shouldn't be made to fear. But if they're feeling that, then we should do something about that.
Last night, a federal judge issued a ruling blocking immigration agents deployed in Minnesota from arresting or using tear gas, pepper spray, or other non-lethal munitions against peaceful protesters.
Remember Tim Walz, the guy who ran for vice president in 2024? Minnesota governor, former teacher, really nice guy by all accounts. Trump's DOJ just subpoenaed him Friday, January 16th, 3 days ago. DOJ leadership appointed by Trump has opened a criminal investigation into whether he conspired to impede federal officers. What's his alleged crime? He criticized ICE. He called their operation in Minnesota organized brutality. He asked people to record federal agents with their phones. He told protesters to stay peaceful. That's it. Political speech, First Amendment stuff. And the Department of Justice is investigating him for it. Oh, and they also subpoenaed Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. Same charge, same investigation. His crime? He told ICE to get the fuck out of Minneapolis after they shot a woman dead in her car. He filed a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the federal deployment. Look, I'm going to be real with you. This is terrifying, and I'm not the only one saying it. Even CNN's legal analyst Elie Honig went off about this. He said DOJ has lost its damn mind. He promised if they bring an indictment for obstruction, I promise you, they will lose. Honig said this is core First Amendment political speech, and it's simply not obstruction of justice. Former federal prosecutor Harry Litman called the investigation total garbage and a complete non-starter. These aren't progressive activists. These are mainstream legal experts. And they're saying the Justice Department has lost it. Here's what makes this even more insane. Over the weekend, the Pentagon put 1,500 soldiers on standby for possible deployment to Minnesota. 1,500 active duty troops from the 11th Airborne Division in Alaska, Arctic warfare specialists, cold weather operations experts. They're on prepare to deploy orders. That means they're ready to move the moment Trump gives the command. And when would he give that command? If he invokes the Insurrection Act. I need you to understand what that means. The Insurrection Act lets the president deploy the military as law enforcement on U.S. soil. It's been used 30 times in American history. The last time was 1992 during the LA riots. Trump threatened to invoke it last Thursday. He posted on Truth Social that if Minnesota politicians don't, quote, obey the law and stop the professional agitators and insurrectionists, he'll institute the Insurrection Act and quickly put an end to the travesty, end quote. So let me put this together for you. The federal government is investigating elected officials for criticizing federal agents. The Deputy Attorney General is personally threatening them on social media. And the Pentagon has 1,500 troops ready to deploy against American protesters. You want to know how bad it's gotten? Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche posted on X directly at Walz and Frey. Here's what he said, quote, Walz and Frey, I'm focused on stopping you from your terrorism by whatever means necessary. This is not a threat. It's a promise, end quote. Read that again. The Deputy Attorney General of the United States accused the governor and a mayor of terrorism on social media. By whatever means necessary, that's mob talk. That's threatening language, and it's coming from the number 2 official at the Justice Department. Then, Blanche went on Fox News Sunday and defended invoking the Insurrection Act. He said there may come a time when the president has to order that, and we support him. The Attorney General supports him, because we have to keep the citizens safe. Keep citizens safe from what? From protesters? From a governor asking people to document what federal agents are doing? Let me tell you what Tim Walz actually said, because the DOJ is treating this like he incited violence or something. Here's his actual statement. He told Minnesotans, quote, help us establish a record of exactly what's happening in our communities. You have an absolute right to peacefully film ICE agents as they conduct their activities. So, carry your phone with you at all times. And if you see ICE in your neighborhood, take out that phone and hit record. End quote. He continued, quote, help us create a database of the atrocities against Minnesotans, not just to establish a record for posterity, but to bank evidence for future prosecution. End quote. That's the crime. Asking people to record police, telling them it's their right to film federal agents, calling for documentation of what's happening. Walz also repeatedly told people to stay peaceful. He urged Minnesotans, quote, not to fan the flames of chaos, end quote. He made a direct appeal to Trump, saying, quote, let's turn the temperature down. Stop this campaign of retribution. This is not who we are, end quote. And what did Mayor Frey do? He told protesters to remain peaceful, multiple times. He said stay peaceful, so Trump won't see a need to send in the military. He filed a constitutional lawsuit. He criticized federal tactics. He called them an occupying force. Political speech, all of it. Criticism of government, calls for peaceful protest, constitutional litigation. These are protected activities. This is how democracy works. The DOJ is saying that because Walz and Frey criticized ICE, and because protests happened after that, they conspired to impede federal officers. That's the theory. Your words caused protests. Protests created obstacles for federal agents. Therefore, you obstructed justice. I'm telling you, that's insane. If that's the standard, any politician who criticizes any federal agency could be charged with obstruction. Any activist who speaks out could be investigated. Any citizen who complains about government could face prosecution. This is the chilling effect made real. This is how you silence opposition. You don't arrest everyone who protests. You arrest the leaders. You investigate the governors and mayors. You make examples of high-profile people so everyone else shuts up. And here's what really gets me. The federal agent who shot Renee Good, the ICE officer who killed a 37-year-old mother of three, a U.S. citizen, a poet, DOJ has announced there will be no federal investigation, none. Deputy AG Blanche announced 3 days after the shooting that there would be no federal investigation and no charges. He declared no crime occurred. 3 days. They made that determination in 3 days, before key evidence was gathered, before witness statements were complete, before forensic analysis was done. Walz pointed this out. He said, quote, "The only person not being investigated for the shooting of Renee Good is the federal agent who shot her," end quote. Instead, the DOJ is investigating Good's widow for her ties to anti-ICE groups. Let that sink in. The widow of a woman killed by a federal agent is being investigated. The governor who criticized that killing is being subpoenaed. And the agent who pulled the trigger? Nothing. No investigation, no charges, no accountability. 6 federal prosecutors quit the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office this week. 6. They resigned because they objected to the DOJ's push to investigate Renee Good's widow. Career prosecutors who spent years, decades in some cases, serving the Justice Department. They quit because what they were being asked to do was wrong. This is happening while nearly 3,000 federal agents are deployed in what local officials describe as an occupation of Minnesota. That's 5 times the size of the entire Minneapolis Police Department. The Department of Homeland Security calls this the largest operation in its history. 3,000 agents deployed to one city to enforce immigration law. And when local officials criticize that deployment, when they ask citizens to document what's happening, when they file lawsuits challenging the constitutionality of the operation, the federal government investigates them for conspiracy. The Pentagon spokesperson gave a statement Sunday about the troop deployment. His name is Sean Parnell, and you know what he said? He said, quote, "The Department of War is always prepared to execute the orders of the Commander-in-Chief if called upon," end quote. He referred to it as the Department of War. Whether intentionally or not, I can't say. The Pentagon hasn't officially been called the Department of War since 1947, but Parnell used that term. It tells you something about the moment we're in. Look, I know this sounds extreme. I know it sounds like I'm being hyperbolic. Trust me, I wish I was. I wish I could tell you this is all overblown and everything's fine. I can't, because it's not fine. When the Deputy Attorney General calls elected officials terrorists on social media, that's authoritarian behavior. When the Pentagon readies troops to deploy against protesters, that's military escalation. When the DOJ investigates governors for criticizing federal agents, that's political persecution. These aren't normal things. These aren't things that happen in democracies. These are things that happen when governments move toward authoritarianism. And it's not just Minnesota. Trump's DOJ has opened investigations into multiple elected officials in the past 2 weeks. Mark Kelly, Senator from Arizona, Elissa Slotkin, Senator from Michigan, Secretary of State Jenna Griswold from Colorado. Now Walz and Frey. What do they all have in common? They criticized Trump. They questioned his policies. They spoke out against what they saw as federal overreach. The pattern is clear. Oppose Trump, face investigation. Criticize federal agents, get subpoenaed. Question the administration, become a target. Tim Walz is someone you know. You watched him debate J.D. Vance. You saw him on the campaign trail. You heard him talk about being a teacher, a coach, a neighbor. Maybe you voted for him, maybe you didn't. Doesn't matter. He's a familiar face, a sitting governor, a former teacher, a guy who seems pretty reasonable and decent. And they're coming for him, for political speech, for asking people to record police, for calling on protesters to stay peaceful. If you're thinking, well, he must have done something more than that, he must have crossed some line somewhere, I'm telling you, read the actual charges. Read what the DOJ says he did. It's all speech, all protected First Amendment activity, all things any of us might do if we saw something concerning happening in our community. If they can do it to a governor, they can do it to anyone. That's the message. That's what this is designed to communicate. Nobody's safe. Nobody's protected. Speak out and face consequences. The grand jury proceedings could start soon. Walz and Frey will have to respond to these subpoenas. They'll probably have to testify. They'll need lawyers. This will consume their time, their energy, their resources. And if the DOJ actually brings charges, if they indict a sitting governor for political speech, legal experts say they'll lose in court. Ellie Honig promised they'll lose, but that might not matter to them because the process is the punishment. The investigation itself is the message. Meanwhile, those 1,500 troops are sitting in Alaska waiting for orders. Trump could invoke the Insurrection Act at any moment. The military could be deployed to Minnesota within hours. American soldiers confronting American protesters in American streets. Legal scholars point out that the last time the Insurrection Act was used against a state without coordination with that state's governor was the 1960s. Eisenhower and Kennedy used it to enforce school desegregation. Federal troops going to the South to protect black students from violent mobs. That's the historical precedent Trump would be invoking, except this time, it wouldn't be to protect civil rights. It would be to suppress protest, to intimidate critics, to silence opposition. I'm telling you, we're in dangerous territory here. When you combine federal investigations of political opponents with military deployment threats, with personal intimidation from the deputy AG, you're looking at the architecture of authoritarianism. These aren't isolated incidents. This is a pattern, a strategy. Use the Justice Department to target critics. Use the military to threaten dissenters. Use the full power of the federal government to crush opposition. And it's working. 6 prosecutors quit rather than be part of it. How many officials are staying quiet because they're scared? How many mayors and governors and state legislators are thinking twice before criticizing federal actions? How many regular people are deciding it's safer to just keep their heads down? I'll tell you what scares me most. It's how fast this is happening. 2 weeks ago, we were talking about Trump's cabinet picks. Now, we're talking about federal investigations of governors and military deployment to cities. 2 weeks. That's how quickly things can escalate when there are no guardrails. That's the chilling effect. That's self-censorship. That's what happens when speaking out becomes dangerous. Democracy doesn't die in darkness. It dies in silence. When people are too afraid to talk, too scared to protest, too intimidated to challenge authority. When good people decide it's not worth the risk. Tim Walz isn't staying silent. Neither is Jacob Frey. They're fighting back. They're speaking out. They're refusing to be intimidated. But they shouldn't have to fight alone. This is bigger than Minnesota. This is about whether elected officials can criticize the federal government without facing prosecution. Whether Americans can protest peacefully without military deployment. Whether democracy survives when authoritarians control the Justice Department. The grand jury will decide whether to indict. Federal judges will rule on the constitutional challenges. Congress could hold oversight hearings. And ultimately, voters will decide in the 2026 midterms whether this is the America they want. But right now, today, Monday, January 19th, 2026, 1,500 American soldiers are on standby waiting for orders to deploy against American protesters. The Deputy Attorney General is calling elected officials terrorists, and the Justice Department is investigating a governor for asking people to record police. This is happening. This is real. This is America in 2026. And I'm telling you, we should all be paying very close attention to what happens next. Thanks for spending a few minutes digging into this with me. If you want more grounded, progressive commentary without the outrage bait, subscribe and stick around. Every time you watch, share, and engage, it helps build a community that believes democracy is worth understanding and defending. I'll see you in the next video.